a Zambia Women's History Museum podcast.
My name is Samba Yonga and I'm a cultural communicator. I'm going to share with you a talk I did at the Envision Africa 2016. It was called The Importance of a History Lesson for African Business. There is an importance attached to history in an economic and entrepreneurial context. I would like to show you some examples of how understanding history actually impacts how we engage in business and how effective we are in executing a venture. At its height in 1922, the British Empire governed a fifth of the world's population and a quarter of the world's total land area. They controlled vast amounts of the world's wealth, and in many cases they still do. They built their prosperity and infrastructure off of this wealth. How do you think such a small country managed to manipulate a fifth of the world? By a lot of subjugation and oppression, yes, but the treatment was only achieved because of the history they taught the people they conquered. What was the history they taught? For Africa, they taught their colonized communities that the harsh treatment that they received was a better way of life than what they could have ever managed for themselves. The colonizers told Africans they were better off leaving the management of their lands and wealth under the empire's care. It didn't matter that it wasn't true. What mattered was the colonized populations believed it or were forced to believe it. And in that sense, they allowed the British Empire to trade on their belief system that their empire was enriching their lives. Of course, we woke up and smelled the coffee and we were all better for it. But think about it. It happened because of a history lesson. Now, I'm not suggesting that we also find some countries to colonize for prosperity. I'm pretty sure that is somewhat frowned upon these days. What I'm saying is, the actions of the colonizers were justified to themselves at the time, and they built empires, industry, and a livelihood based on the history they taught. Let's look at some other contemporary or recent examples of history lessons that have built multi-billion-dollar industries. A good example is the history lesson on the standard of beauty. We spend copious amounts of money feeding an industry because of a story that has been told of how beauty and affluence means you have to have red pouting lips, flowing hair, a flat tummy, six packs, biceps, round butts, shiny shoes, fitted suits, fresh haircuts, strong beard games, skinny jeans, and flawless skin. And it's working. Billions are being made every day. All these examples I have given have had a transformative and impactful way on how we consume and behave towards certain products. And guess what? It's because of the histories that are attached to them. When you think about a transformative effect in history, a big one we can all relate to is the Bible. When it was only available in Latin text, reserved only for the learned clergy, just a few read, and even fewer bought any books. But when it was translated into vernacular for all to read, things changed. It meant not only robbed individuals could reach God and read and write, it meant everyone could. It also meant that a publishing and reading culture exploded, and we all know what that history has produced. That is a good example of how understanding and changing history can transform a society. Now, if we bring it back to the question I asked earlier, the next question to you is, what histories are we teaching? What indigenous histories are we teaching that can transform how we engage in business and entrepreneurship? I often wonder what I'd consider beautiful if I looked at these pictures instead of these as definitions of beauty. Like this woman of the Awemba in the north of Zambia, which is now the Bemba. The Awemba women wore beads as a proud symbol of belonging and as an accessory of beauty. And these beads were made and worn by the women as a symbol of pride in their heritage. But it was also a product that they consumed. Today, this practice is no longer in place. The women don't make beads anymore, and as a society, we have lost the culture. And yet today, we wear African beads from China, South Africa, Kenya, and other places. The irony. What might have happened instead if we'd preserved this history today? We could have a thriving industry creating authentic Zambian accessories. Accessories with an actual cultural meaning, and as a direct result, I suspect our modern perceptions of beauty would be vastly different. But unfortunately, others are the ones who seem to benefit. And though it gives Africa visibility, the resulting benefit still remains firmly out of our hands. Agriculture is one of the largest informal sectors in Zambia, and 70% of subsistence farming is done by women. The industry has been plagued with issues of low productivity, high costs, and lack of access to market. Multiple solutions have been attempted with little success. However, one approach that is being trialed at the moment is relearning traditional methods of farming such as rotation, natural and mixed farming. The results are positive. These traditional practices had long since been forgotten, but are now in the process of being revived. Better practices, better yields, better revenue. Another lesson from history I would like to share is how traditional life skills were taught. To be considered a man and head of a household, one had to be equipped with skills like building a house, making furniture, a road, a boat, looking after livestock, then killing and curing it and serving it up for people to eat. And these were all the skills that would be mastered by an individual. It was understood that to effectively manage their life and their business, they had to master skills. They had to understand their environment and use the knowledge to provide a livelihood. That's understanding their history. Are we masters of our history? Can understanding our history help us master our business environment? Think about it. The reason I'm saying all of this is because we haven't done a very good job of preserving histories generally. But in this case, histories that we could use as studies to help build upon our entrepreneurship. Indigenous history is taught to us now as if it is irrelevant to our present. A bunch of dates against the timeline of events without practical application in our personal lives, let alone our business interaction. And yet, examples of how history affects business abound everywhere. Mukanda is a rite of passage ceremony for the boys of the Northwestern Province. During this ceremony, pubescent boys are taught a wide range of life skills and undergo circumcision as an act of cleansing. For a long time, this practice was condemned, and yet today it is one of the biggest social enterprises in the country, and it is proving to be saving lives. Cassava was one of the main staple foods about 100 years ago in many parts of Zambia. That changed when maize was introduced because it was a better cash crop. However, maize as a cash crop is labor and input intensive, and suddenly hunger started to surface in places where there never was any before. Cassava was an easy crop to grow. It didn't need seeds because it was planted with a shoot. It was drought resistant and could grow in any soil. Recently, experts have now concluded that it is probably better that cassava be reintroduced. The thing is, we already knew all this, and yet for some reason we chose to discard it. This is what I have learned from researching all of this. When we obscure history, especially a history that we can learn from, we miss an opportunity for knowledge, we miss an opportunity for transformation, and we miss an opportunity to pass on a legacy. And more pressing for today, we miss out on an opportunity to make some damn money. We therefore have a challenge, both personal and collective. The challenge to myself is to question what it is I can do to ensure I leave behind a history that others can learn from and build on. The question I present to you today is, what history will you leave behind to ensure that we, Zambians, are better equipped to begin building empires?